Hello, good evening. Welcome to the David Ellis Show. Tonight, I'll be joined by two very distinguished veterans. One we're going to call Tom. We're having to protect his identity on account of his highly distinguished military career, which some of it is sensitive. So we will then be joined by Trevor Coult, Military Cross, a very well established, very well regarded ex-veteran who is personally on a battle himself with the MOD and simultaneously out there at the coalface helping veterans in his immediate community. First, we're going to go to a clip of Mark Francois MP, a prominent Leave campaigner during Brexit, speaking at Defence Select Committee, where he's questioning Sir Stephen Lovegrove, the permanent secretary at the MOD. In that take, Mark Francois uses very strong language, and he states in there that we, as backbench MPs who are very angry, will go to any lengths necessary in order to get a solution to how our veterans are being treated and these vexatious legal claims being made against them.
What has happened to a lot of our veterans, not just in Northern Ireland, but in Iraq and Afghanistan, is a disgrace. There's no other word for it. There is no other country on earth that would treat the people that have fought for its government and its country in this way. What we have done to some of these people is unforgivable. Now, I don't think you are the primary culprits. I think actually, certainly at the moment, the NIO, they are the ones sucking up to Sinn Féin IRA because they're desperate to get them back into the executive. That's not the Ministry of Defence. That's an issue a number of us have with the NIO. We now have three strands in effect. One is this committee's inquiry, following on from the very good work that Johnny and his team did. One is your team in the Ministry of Defence, and one is the fact that the Prime Minister has tasked the Attorney General, with whom, as you've heard, some of us have met, to try and find a way through this problem. So there are three genuine attempts, I believe, to try and come up with something. Can I take this opportunity to tell you in all candour that I think the only reason we've got this far is because of the work of this committee and backbench anger. The establishment, if you like, in quotes, was quite prepared to sell these soldiers down the river for a quiet life and in order to try and keep people like Sinn Féin in their box. And it's also fair to tell you that that anger on the backbenches is growing rapidly, as you will see evidenced in the next couple of weeks. A number of us are absolutely resolved. We will not let this drop, and we will do whatever is necessary in order to get a solution to this.
I'm now joined by Tom, a distinguished British military veteran with extensive and specialised service. We're having to protect Tom's identity, so we've only got a voice. Tom has spent 25 years in the British military, and I begin by asking him about his service.
In general, I'd have to say it was a pleasure. In general, towards the end it wasn't, because the armed forces, I didn't realise this at the time, but the armed forces at that point were being destroyed from the inside, and I didn't realise it. So 26 years service, yep, great time, brilliant lads, but destroyed, utterly destroyed and betrayed by the British state, ultimately.
So this, I just want to bring in Mark Billingham, former SAS
Yes.
soldier, and he's now obviously a member of the SAS Who Dares Wins crew. And he's just had a press release where he's saying that he wants to go to war with the MOD.
Well, I think that's an appropriate comment, because people have to realise we are in a war and the enemy is within, and they are the British state, David.
I'm going to draw in Mark Francois MP, who we've just seen speaking at Defence Committee in 2018, saying that the establishment was going to sell these soldiers down the river. And under the circumstances, Tom, with what we're seeing here with Dennis Hutchins and the first batch of veterans that are being put into court without a jury, that comment seems quite appropriate. How do you feel about it?
I agree with him 100%. I, because I'm the way I am, would probably say it's stronger, but I'm happy with that. The fact is, these lads are being totally betrayed by the British state. I'm going to keep saying that. it's a very hard thing to get your head around, really, because I was a member of the British Armed Forces. Okay, and it's that source now is betraying me and all of the veterans and all of the military.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're at a point now where the fact that these lads are going to trial without a jury, for example, and I think you would agree that is subverting our constitutional rights. The British state have subverted the constitution now since at least 1911, the Parliament Act. We know that, and you know, for example, I'm going to slightly go to one side, but English people are entitled to be armed for defence purposes. That's a fact. It's in the Bill of Rights, and yet that's been subverted. So this is a mass betrayal by the British state. We can't even defend ourselves now.
Will you say about that? I mean, your service career, you spanned many decades, and obviously subsequent, because obviously, you know, what you did in the Falklands is quite some years ago, and we saw immediately after the Falklands, principal capital assets being taken out relatively quickly. You know, roughly in about 1984, where Vulcan and Hermes and all the sort of vital bits of equipment are gone, along with
that continued
cuts
for
to
years.
personnel.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the destruction of assets, like Nimrod, for example. The Nimrod, you know, I had some dealings with the Nimrod fleet for quite some time. I knew the lads very well. They were the best of the best, you know, make no bones about it. And these brand new aircraft, Mark IVs, Mark IV Nimrods, MPA aircraft, were completely destroyed by the Cameron government. Yeah. They were destroyed, completely smashed up. Yeah. Now, why would you do that?
Well, this is, I think it comes back to this sort of dismantling or unification, depending on which way you want to view it, really. But, you know, we've got to, you know, I'm going to say unification. I always have. I'll stick to my gambit on that. It's not a question of cutting. It's a question of blending it all together. Now, Mark Francois, when he was summing up in Defence Select Committee, said something very, very, I think, quite apt, because it follows on to the subsequent group that has formed, called the Veteran Support Group. There's about 40-odd MPs in this group. Now, there was a press release in The Sun, a photograph. But what I'm wondering, and I'd like your opinion on this, is there doesn't seem to be a lot of activity since. Now, this is the key part of what Mark Francois said, is that in closing, he came out with this: whatever is necessary to get a solution, we are going to press to get some closure on these issues of the pursuit of the veterans. All right, with the legal pursuits. So whether that be from, you know, IHAT or through to the Northmore investigations that were happening under Afghanistan, despite nobody knowing about it. But obviously we've got this major stumbling block here of the Northern Ireland veterans. Now, last week we were speaking to Dennis Hutchins, who's, I've got to say, one of the most selfless men that I've ever met, because he didn't have to fight this, but he chose to fight it because of his regard for the armed services and the future of our armed services, because of the impact that it would have on them. And that's absolutely ratified with what General David Petraeus said at his comments at the Policy Exchange about the impact that this is having. So Dennis had said to me that he was under no illusion that the direction of travel was to get Special Forces veterans in the dock and send them down. So
that is a fact.
Right,
that is his opinion. I can tell you that is a fact.
A fact. So
yes.
When Mark Billingham he's obviously SAS, he's talking about going to war with the MOD.
Yes.
So obviously, you know, we're in a situation. This is not just paras or Marines or frontline regiments. This is the Special Forces. So with Mark Billingham and the rest of his crew there on SAS Who Dares Wins, you know, have you got a message for those guys?
No, I haven't. But what I will say, this attack, because the SF, Special Forces within this country, are revered around the world. They're the best of the best. And then if you come down a little, just a little, you'll be looking at paras and Royal Marines. Mrs. Thatcher, just after the Iranian embassy, which was a brilliant operation, she called the Special Air Service then her boys. It went all around the world, and it was a very, very famous incident. Everybody revered them. It was the first time that he'd been exposed to media, this sort of stuff. And Maggie Thatcher used that press in a positive way, I believe. I've met her twice, and I tell you, she was a clued up cookie. But what I will say is the attack at the moment, David, as you know, the attack at the moment is now, it's being fronted towards SF. It's being fronted to other agencies involved with SF. And they're attacking the Paras and Marines. It's only 2 or 3 years ago where we thought we were going to see the complete destruction of the parachute regiment.
Yeah.
Now we know they're attacking the Royal Marines. These are the best of the best. Yeah. And people only have to ask, why would you do this? Why wouldn't you get rid of, shall we say, the lesser regiments? They're attacking the best.
Yeah.
They're taking away our complete ability to defend ourselves independently.
The key bit there that I'm picking up on is independent. And I've said this before, that the overriding or underriding policy, whether it's accepted or known or not, is not to do defence on a national basis, but on a pan-EU basis for decades now.
Yes.
Can probably, we can cite the 57 Sandys paper, but that's crucial here because, and I'm just going to kind of come at it from this angle. What would be the impact on not just the British military itself, so this is the personnel serving currently, but the future impact, and then our ability to influence globally if a member of the Special Forces is put in the dock and sent down in the fashion that they're trying to do with Dennis Hutchins?
I think it's a difficult question. It depends. I thought about this a lot. There was an attack made on SF after the Gibraltar operation, which is a brilliant operation. And the British state then, looking back on it, actually imported so-called witnesses who lied. Wow. Maybe they didn't lie on by default, but their recollection of the incident, David, was incorrect. That's a fact. So there was an attack. I think it was made through ITN then to go for SF at that point. Now, what I can say is that the story I'm getting in, the feedback I'm receiving is that there is quite a lot of unrest within the senior regiments, if you like, all fold, including SF. I think people are recognizing there's a major problem. And if anybody was to go in the dock and be criminalized effectively, like Alexander Blackman, Royal Marine, was.
Yep.
I'm not sure whether we would see a fight back from the public. What I will say is, why are the British? Why are they trying? Why are they trying to destroy the veterans and the armed forces? Now let's go to the veterans. They are attempting to destroy the very strong feeling by the majority of the country for the veterans. They see the veterans as a group, as a big threat, and I believe they are.
You see, this is
what would happen, David? What would happen if anybody from SF ended up in court and was convicted? I don't know. I would like to hope there would be complete uprising, but I don't think that'll happen.
You see, this is I'm going to sort of sum up with this. So it's Mark Francois, and if there's anything to come out of this, what we've got to see is some traction and some linking up with this group of these veteran support MPs. There's 40 of them apparently. So when Mark closed his comments, he was saying no other country would treat their veterans in this unforgivable fashion.
I don't believe they would. I mean, I've worked with American forces for a long time and Canadian, and the support in general that the American veterans get is vastly superior. Yeah. For example, in this country, well, one example was, of course, this nonsense called the military covenant. Yeah. And as I've explained to people in the past, under the military covenant isn't law, is it? They can just dismiss it. Yeah. Now, for example, my GP, I was required to register myself with my current GP as a veteran. I was laughed at. And I said, well, as a veteran, I should be getting priority in my treatment. And they basically laughed at me. I mean, we're supposed to have priority with housing. Now, I understand there's 15,000 veterans that are homeless, for crying out loud. Yeah. So, but but nobody takes a blind bit of notice of the military covenant. We're not being supported. We're not being supported. We're being destroyed. Yeah. The key question is, David, is why are they destroying this very revered element of our country? That's the key question.
Tom is airing there a dissatisfaction in the veterans community that I am feeling across the board. And it's not just dissatisfaction about how Northern Ireland veterans are being treated. The dissatisfaction runs from the unification and defence cuts through to how the MOD and ministers are conducting themselves. Joining me now is Trevor Coult, Military Cross, a distinguished veteran and campaigner. And I begin by asking him about the performance of Johnny Mercer MP and the Office of Veterans Affairs.
There's not a single veteran in the UK will tell you that me and Johnny Mercer get on, the Veterans Minister. We don't get on. And that's the bottom line. Now, as a person, Johnny has served his country. I respect that. I will always respect that. This is not a vendetta against Mr. Mercer, because this is me pushing the position that he holds. Now, prior to him, I used to have a go at Tobias Elwood. I used to have a go. I've had a few digs at Ben Wallace. And I don't do it because I just don't like them. I do it because they're in that specific role, which they get paid money to try and implement and improve. Now, if they're not doing it, then there's an issue. Now, the MOD a couple of days ago were very quick at putting out posts saying that, well done. Today is 1 year since the establishment of the Veterans Affairs Office. And you know what? It got massive round of applause.
Yeah.
And I find that weird because it's 1 year. That's 365 days since it actually got implemented. Now, whenever you look at that when it was first established, two of the key areas for that being established was one, to end historical allegations, and the second one was to implement the military covenant and law.
Yeah.
There are two things they still haven't managed to achieve.
Yeah.
That was the reason why the two things they haven't managed to achieve. Now, I have had many a run-in with Johnny Mercer, and one of the things I don't like is the fact that they have established a Veterans Affairs Office, and they keep asking civilian companies to sign up to the military covenant to promote veterans, but yet they haven't employed any veterans themselves to work in the Veterans Affairs Office.
Well, it's
one thing which every single veteran.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I saw that today when it was released, and there was quite a big, they triangulated across all the social media, but the one I saw that stood out was the Twitter release. And the thing that leapt off the page for me was that the Veterans Affairs Office is in the Cabinet Office. It's not in the MOD. Yeah. The office is actually in the Cabinet Office. And I think some time ago when you said, Johnny, what you need to do is get some warrant officers in here and some hard-nosed sergeants, and you suggested a bit of a format to how this, what it would take to fix veterans. I think that's the term you used. Mm-hmm. And I suspect strongly what's going on in here. This is very bureaucratic in this office because that's what the Cabinet Office is. And what people have got to realise is that Johnny Mercer is not the government. He only forms part of the government, and the majority of it is the Crown and the Civil Service, in effect, in the Cabinet Office. They constitute the Crown, in effect. And then the check and balance is in the Lords. Now, I know you and I have had quite a lot of interaction with a lot of ex-military Lords where we've got traction and they're trying to do stuff. The likes of General Dannett. But I've got to say, I wrongly assumed that Johnny would be in the MOD. No, he's in the Cabinet Office. So I think that brings us very close to the sort of bureaucratic end of it. And particularly with whatever the permanent civil service secretaries will be there that are actually managing this. And I think Hilary Meredith has just said something yesterday, one of the top veterans lawyers, that she was very unhappy with Johnny bringing in some alteration to the bill that's coming up, that's going to put back veterans' causes. And what she was saying is that the new factor that Johnny was bringing in was detrimental. So have you picked up on that, and what do you feel about it?
Yes, well, I spoke to, I can't mention these things. You know who I spoke to on the phone. I spoke to a retired general on the phone a few days ago.
Yep.
And we are convinced. Now, bear in mind, he still is in the Lords and does different things, and he helps promote. And he spoke to you on the phone, I believe. But we believe that Johnny Mercer doesn't have any say. He's the most junior minister in the House of Commons, and he doesn't have. He's made too many promises which he can't fulfill, Dave. He can't fulfill them because he is still learning the ropes. But if that's the case, rather than pretend to be a highfalutin minister, why not just tell the veterans? He would get a lot more support from the veterans community if he just came out and said, listen, guys, my role's quite low. I am trying my best, but I can't achieve these things because of A, B, and C. If he was to come out and say that, Dave, then he would get lots of respect. But the fact that he keeps, for instance, his title is veterans. That's title is veterans.
Yeah, I think that's crucial. I mean, it's something. Dennis Hutchins and I were discussing this last week, and I asked him, and I'm going to ask you the same question: where do you see the blockage? Do you see the blockage with the ministers, which is obviously the only thing we have to work with that we elect? We don't elect the civil servants, right? In effectively that portion of the government. So all we've got is Johnny Mercer. But I asked Dennis, where do you see the problem here? Because the 100 days gambit has come and gone. Is the problem the ministers, or is it with the civil servants? Where do you see it?
If I see the problem lying firmly with Mark Sedwill and those within the civil service who may not be elected, but as a group of people, they basically run Boris Johnson, they run the MOD, they run the Cabinet Office, and they run most things in the country, and they're not even elected. The problem lies with them and what they've got tied up in small groups in order to facilitate their future, but not the future of the country.
Yeah, I think it's quite telling. I think your point really sort of rings true with this, that if he'd got, some hard-nosed warrant officers and sergeants and NCOs in that office to back him up, things would happen. But what they've done is that he's not in the MOD. They've took him into the Cabinet Office, into the belly of government. And I suspect that a lot of the bureaucrats that are around him and the civil servants, and I'm just putting it out there, I'm going to submit this as a question. This sort of detrimental factor that Hilary Meadows is talking about, is it Johnny Mercer or is it the bureaucrats that are bringing this in? Because there's quite a money aspect to what the impact would be with the statute of limitations on veterans' claims. So we see the money again. I'm going to draw in a couple of comments that I think that are quite crucial with this, because it factors in with what Johnny's trying to do, and that is the unity in the veterans community, which is starting to happen, and I think it's absolutely crucial that the unity is there. And I'm going to quote Admiral Lord Boyce, who I was very fortunate to meet at the start of Brexit, who said to me, "These sorts of things are best done together." So on the veterans unity side of it, Trevor, over to you. How do you see it forming at the moment?
Well, it's great to see. You mentioned something there which I totally I'm all for. We've spent years and years and years with different veterans groups going on their own direction, and it wasn't the fact that they didn't want to work together. It was the fact that one believed in trying to do mental health, one believed in legs on, so many different groups, homelessness. But we are now seeing groups starting to work together, which is fantastic, Dave. And you know what? It's a credit to all these groups because they all started off on their own path for their own journey to achieve their goals. And they've all realized that when you get to the end of that path, you need to reach out to the other groups to push it that little bit forward. So it's great to see. It's not there yet. Nothing's ever going to be perfect, but it is good to see. With regards to what Hilary Meredith said, yes, I agree. I spoke to Hilary and she is fantastic. She knows law inside out. But we have constantly seen Johnny Mercer say the same phrase: I got into politics to help veterans. Well, if you've got into politics to help veterans, why are you pushing forward a bill which doesn't help veterans at all? In fact, it hinders us in moving forward. So the reason why he got into politics, which he keeps saying, was to help veterans. Now, it's got to the stage where we're thinking, well, why are you changing? If you were really dedicated for veterans, then you'd be saying no to this bill. But the fact that you're willing to sell your soul for it tells us now that you're not the man to speak for veterans anymore.
Well, I think there's certainly been a change, because what's happening there in the ministry in Veterans Affairs, which obviously the Americans have had that system for quite a while, and we've just got it. But the one leg of the table that's missing is, of course, is a cohesive veterans group, and I think that's something that Britain needs desperately. But I've got to say, when Johnny presented at Select Committee some time ago, and he was challenging Stephen Lovegrove, the Permanent Secretary, who's figured quite a lot recently in veterans' own social media, and he said at that Select Committee meeting something really, really crucial to Lovegrove, that you've thrown veterans to the wolves. That's a really strong comment. That's the kind of, I think that gave everyone a lot of hope at the time. Where are we now?
We are in the same place that we started, apart from the fact that if anything's happening now, we can see that the veterans community is starting to bond together and move forward. We're not fools. We've been played with fools for so long. It doesn't matter what gets said in the House of Commons. They know there's cameras watching, Dave. They know that people are watching going, oh, look, he's just said that. But for instance, the other day, Johnny Mercer spoke about suicide. There was more Labour people sitting there than there was Conservative. Jesus Christ, and these people don't care. So it doesn't matter what you say in the House of Commons. It matters what you say in the House of Commons when it's got a complete full house and everyone has to listen. It doesn't matter what you say in the House of Commons when there's 6 people listening, because you know what? It just falls on deaf ears.
So that's a matter for Prime Minister's questions when there's a packed house. I absolutely totally agree with that. I just want to bring this in now, and we discussed it with another former veteran earlier in the show, and that's Marc Francois, a very strong Leave. He was very strong in the Leave campaign, absolutely silent on European Defence Union. But as subsequently to the Brexit period, if you want to call it that we see this group formed called the Veteran Support Group, a group of 40 MPs. They seem to be predominantly Tory, at least I think they were by the photo that I saw. But since that group has been formed, have you picked up anything that they're doing, or have they reached out to you, or do you know if they've reached out to any other people campaigning?
Dave, I can no. I do know who they are. I've had to research it though to find out. I mean, it's not like they're for people to see. You've got to really research and find out. Even if you type in veterans group and MOD group and veterans MOD group, nothing comes up on a search. You have to really dig deep to find this on a deep search. So that group does exist, but the minute you put anything about the European Union, European defence, the minute you type anything and you stick it out in social media, I can assure you that your account gets looked at. I know from personal experience that whenever
well, I've seen you field quite a bit of I'm going to call it whiplash from whenever you've gone near that political. I'm going to call it a political hotspot because it is. You fielded quite a bit of whiplash whenever you've gone into that political area.
Oh, Dave, it's been atrocious, and you know what? It takes everyone to push that in order to get that open. Because if it's individuals pushing at that topic, individuals get closed down. In the last couple of years, I've started to sort of see what's happened since Brexit and Nigel Farage. We've all realised there's been an issue with the military side of it. We've seen, is it the European Defence Headquarters now based in Norfolk in England? So
it was in Northwood, and it's subsequently, I think, under a lot of pressure and attention, or at least some pressure and attention from UK Column and one or two others. It's moved over to Spain, but I mean that was the hypocrisy in Brexit that this key factor, which is going to be how defence is going to be managed in Europe on a pan-EU basis, that there was this denial from David Cameron and his ministers that there was no EU army. Well, it never was. It was all tri-services. When the very HQ for EU NAVFOR was in our own HQ in Northwood, and there's Cameron denying it even exists. I mean, this is just, it's flat. For me, it's smacked in the face. But it was just the hypocrisy of it.
Well, I've felt it. I felt the blow. I felt the blow quite a lot. In the last 2 years, I don't want to go back too far, but say in the last 2 years, I have been, whenever I've been pushing for veterans issues and pushing the MOD and pushing the generals and having stories out in the media week after week after week, I had my house phone tapped. I had to get that all redone and rewired. And it was a guy that I knew, a guy that I still know from, he's ex-Special Forces and MI5 who helped me redo that. That was done. My son's school was targeted. My son's different groups were targeted.
Your
Anyone who was associated with me was
family.
threatened. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. There was. I can't mention any names. Don't want to go into too many names, but for instance, there was veterans-owned companies that decided they wanted to support me because I was helping veterans. Received threats that they would have their wives and children raped if they were to stay with me. They were threatened, and they had to walk away from me. Just recently, I have been threatened again. I'm trolled on social media non-stop and threatened all the time. I'm accused of fraud. I had to go through a year 1 year fraud investigation by all the police, checking all the things I had done to help veterans. The Charity Commission they got involved because it was reported to them for pretending to run a charity. So everything I've tried to do for veterans, the minute I start speaking about European defence or I start speaking about veterans, I get hounded. I get closed down. It's just ridiculous. I can't even speak to my mother and on the phone without being listened in. And I can tell you this now because my mother used to be in the military. She did work in the signals and she worked in places in the armed forces where she used to do things. I can't explain what she used to do. But whenever I was talking to her on the phone, she said to me, Trevor, be quiet a minute and just listen. And we listened. And she went, I recognise that sound. Your call's being listened into.
Yeah.
And I went, okay, well, let's use the other means. I said to her, she knows.
Yeah.
My dad knows. And we all know.
Yeah.
It's just shocking how a system which promotes freedom of speech tries to close you down whenever you have a valid point which you would like to address.
Yeah.
And if you I sent a letter to the Prime Minister about issues with the MOD, and he didn't even read it. He fobbed it off to Johnny Mercer's office, who then had his secretariat respond to me, telling me Johnny's doing a great job. And I just thought, what's the point? Just throw it in the bin.
Yeah, it's almost a
ridiculous.
template.
Whenever I was pushing things,
I'll
say this one last thing, Dave, to you. Whenever I was pushing things with mental health, and Prince Harry got involved, I got a phone call from the Royal Foundation and threatened me to stay away from Prince Harry and stop including him. So there we go. You can't exactly, and it was by an ex special forces guy who was working alongside the protection side of Prince Harry. So they're all into it. They don't give a damn.
Yeah, and you think you're living in a liberal democracy. I just want to bring in the warnings from General David Petraeus when he spoke at the Policy Exchange about the legal framework that our armed services fight under, or used to fight under, shall I say. Used to fight under the Geneva Convention. Subsequent to going into the EU, we've adopted European human rights legislation, and this has brought about the rift or the friction that it's now precipitating with these legal claims against our veterans, and in some cases, like Dennis, decades on from the time when he served. And I think that those warnings that Petraeus gave were so succinct and powerful that he was talking about recruitment, impact on recruitment because of this lawfare. The retention, guys, well, how are you supposed to, do your job under the circumstances of this, contradiction in the law? And the future fighting relationship between Britain and America. Now, at that Policy Exchange meeting was Johnny Mercer. And so there's no excuse. These people know what the score is. And my question to you, Trevor, is that under the current situation, defence and security is currently not included in Brexit. So if you think you're leaving the EU with our military and defence industry, you're not as it stands, unless David Frost does something about it. That the potential is that the British Armed Forces will be fighting, or could be fighting, under an EU legislative framework because they will be in defence union. So how do you, as a time-served veteran, feel about that?
It's hard to really. It's hard for a member of the. I'll look at it from a 2 point of view. As a member of the public, it's hard to sort of understand what's going on because when the public look at the army and working with other armies, they don't see it as one army. For some reason, the public just see the British Army working with the Spanish and the French and the German. That's how the public see it, and they're thinking, well, what's the point? Now, from a military perspective, I see a group of professional men and women having to deploy and not being in control of the battle, not being in control of what's happening in the air. Other countries having the lead on that. It's bad enough at the minute, Dave, going on operations with the Americans and them controlling, for instance, the intelligence side of it, them controlling it all. Because whenever I was working in, I'll just bring it back to this, but whenever I was working in Afghanistan and I was on certain missions, I knew that if I was to send, if I was to use the different types of equipment, the hide and seek, and I would do the fingers, the swabs, and the iris scans, and I sent it back into my joint operations cell, I might not get a hit. It'll have to go all the way back to London. It could have taken up to a week to get that information. Whereas a lot of British forces on the ground, whenever they were going through the intelligence side of it, would just bypass the UK and send it straight through the American system, and they would have that information back within the hour. So
Wow.
we are way behind. We are way
Wow.
behind in intelligence. It's shocking, isn't it? Now,
That's
we
shocking,
have to
isn't the
give
word for
everything
it?
we find.
Yep. I
We've
think,
got to give all our intelligence. We've got to share it with the US. Now, here's the weird thing. The US don't have to share all their intelligence with us. It was a bit like the Geneva Convention, Dave, because we signed up to it wholeheartedly. The Americans went, we'll take that bit, we'll take that bit. We're not doing that. So they signed up to it a little bit. With working with the European Union, from personal experience, their military are way below standard compared to the British. Our intelligence is higher than those of Europe, but yet America is higher than us. So that is why we always work with Americans, and the fact that there's trades and money. But with the EU, we give so much, but we get very little back. And I don't honestly see it as a positive moving forward.
no.
I see it as a negative because we need to be in control of what we do. Our special forces used to go around the world, I think they still do, and teach other special forces. I know guys who are ex-special forces who now teach the Norwegian special forces who are based in Brunei and Belize. So a lot of our ex-special forces now go around the world teaching other special forces. And these are guys that's retired. We keep updating our tactics and our intelligence only to be giving it away.
I'm just going to close back to what General Petraeus said there, because the culmination of it all was that the lawfare position was untenable. And what you've just articulated there with going over your own experience in Afghanistan demonstrates what that guy was saying perfectly, that this current situation is untenable. And there's an impact on fighting capability, which I think was the general point of what he was saying, is if you carry on with this, Britain, your fighting capability is going to be severely compromised. And that is exactly what you've just highlighted in terms of the control and the intelligence. Now, you're talking there about special forces, and I'm going to just bring Mark Billingham in at this stage. So, former SAS veteran and now a member of the SAS Who Dares Wins crew. And he's saying that he's going to go to war over the MOD, over the treatment of veterans. You know, so where do you see him going with that?
I believe, I know that Mark's a very influential person. He has great contacts. He has more contacts than I do, clearly. And he will come at this at a different angle, where the generals that he knows are all ex-UKSF type. And so if they can tie up with the likes of the generals that we know and they work together in a campaign, we can see massive changes. It's great that Mark has decided to speak out. He was very good friends in the same team, actually, as Dave Penman, who died recently.
Yeah.
And I've been seeing that suicide's been playing down. It's been playing down. People are saying, no, he didn't. I was with him, and they weren't with him. You know, the guy, at the end of the day, the guy had went and lived in Thailand, and it's a shame. I think that Mark will add a little bit more clout. It's good to see him getting involved. It really is. We need someone like Mark, and I just hope that he brings on other influential people. Yeah.
For Mark Francois, Ian Duncan Smith, Bob Stewart, Richard Drax, Stuart Anderson, in the Veterans Support Group of MPs, claiming to sort of support veterans and be on this issue, I'm wondering what will it take for Mark Francois and his colleagues, friends and colleagues, to get a solution to this for the veterans. Will it take a big reset in British defence policy? Will it be to come out of European Defence Union as it currently stands in order to get away from that lawfare that General David Petraeus warned of? Will it take the veterans community to come with the MPs, or the MPs to come with the veterans community? Unity there has got to be the solution, as our only instrument for dealing with this situation as a people is Parliament. There is no other instrument available for us to deal with this issue, as I was rightly pointed out by a former head of the Royal Navy. Let's not forget that the hardest and most detrimental defence cuts, and I've always pitched that as unification, but politically it's pitched as defence cuts in order that the people accept it. It's almost become normalised that this is a given, that we see decade after decade defence cuts, despite the world becoming more and more dangerous. So under those Tory governments that have continually given us the most detrimental impact, the fight that Mark Francois and his friends and colleagues have got can't really be underestimated, because clearly there, since the Duncan Sandys incept of doing defence on a pan-EU basis, and let's not forget that Duncan Sandys set up the EU movement in Britain. So let's be under no illusion, that sets the real scene for not just what's going on at the core of defence policy within the Tory party and the government. The warnings from General Petraeus and Donald Trump cannot be clearer, that this impact cannot be allowed to continue. David Petraeus states that even it was getting untenable, that the position between British and American military is seriously under threat. Now that gambit there that Mr. Trump keeps making about NATO and the money is a very important gambit, because what is the real drive here with the undertone in British government? Is it to drag America into European theatre and into European Defence Union on Britain's shirt tails membership of NATO? Some answers are needed. Clearly, in 1984, when Maggie was asked by Jacques Delors at Fontainebleau for Defence Union, and she said no at the time, subsequently reiterated in the House of Commons, but it was within the framework of no to not just Defence Union, which was never mentioned at the time or subsequent. The no, no, no speech, there was one no that was never spoken of, and that was Defence Union. The currency union was open in the public. We said no to the euro. But this continual silence on this issue is going to be very, very costly. And what those Veteran Support Group MPs and our veterans community and Middle Britain really needs to know now is how defence and security is going to be managed in the future. Will Boris and Michael Gove say no to Defence Union as Maggie did? We need to know. Good night.